Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. And as you can tell, unless Dwaylen really changed his appearance, Delicious Dwaylen will not be appearing this week. He is on vacation down in Florida with his family, having a great time. I've actually been texting him, just seeing how things are going. And he had never been to Florida before, and he's absolutely loving it. In fact, I just looked at some pictures that they had posted on Facebook few minutes ago and loving the beach, which I don't blame them. And I've actually been to the beach that they're at right now, and it is just absolutely awesome. I'm kind of a beach lover myself, even though I'm living in Ohio, where they don't really have beaches. But at the same time, go check out Dwaylen's podcast, though, The Intellectual Rock Star. That's his podcast where he self-proclaims, talks about everything nerdy. Joining me, though, however, today is Justin from TNC SportsTalk. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing well. How are you? Good morning.
Doing all right. And Justin knew I was going to be flying solo if we were ever going to be able to have a podcast at all. So he actually said, "Hey, do you need just a guest co-host while Dwaylen's gone? For this week?" I said, "Sure." So thank you, Justin, for stepping in and helping us keep the show going. And wildly, Justin and I had not seen each other in person for a little over a year. Until this past Saturday, where we both happened to be at the Bengals Stadium at Paycor Stadium. I want to call it Paul Brown Stadium, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of the corporate sponsorship, but whatever. But
I've noticed that's been happening lately, to be honest. Stadiums have been
everywhere.
Changing names, and I'm not used to it. I thought there was a lot of rich history and people understand the history when they called it Paul Brown Stadium and the reasoning behind all of that. But then Paycor Stadium for me kind of came out of the blue, but it creates fundings. And I read an article last week about the Bengals having, like, they're in the top 5 of fan experience at the stadium, like best fan experience. And they've also, because of, the naming of the stadium and the fundings and obviously their success, they're contributing into like some new fun, exciting sites while you're at the stadium. The jungle that the players take. Well, they're actually going to create a replica of that for fans interaction, and you can take pictures and videos in that little scenery, which I think is pretty cool.
The one thing that my son and I we were going to do, because you happened to catch us, you got there not long before we left, and so we caught you in line. You were getting something to drink because, well, it was blazing hot outside, and when you got what was it? Probably 10,000 people there, at least. Oh
gosh, the most crowded I've ever seen just for a practice.
Yeah, and I mean, if that says anything about how the Bengals have been doing the past few years, I mean, all of a sudden, the Houday people are all showing up. You're not.
Let me put it to you in this perspective. I got 2 younger kids. One's going to be 9 in August, and the one's already 5 this year. Where they were holding my hands, and they're kind of, we're like the ducks lined up in a row holding hands, trying to get through the crowd. Well, they're standing right next to me, and it's so packed that I look over to look at them, and I can't see them because there's so many people. And I'm holding their hand, but I can't see them still. They're right underneath me, and it's like, okay, that's like it was. We're like, you can't. There's no way to walk, without bumping into somebody. I mean, it's a good thing, but there was for me, it was definitely overcrowded.
Yeah, there was a metric crap ton of people there just for a practice, especially. And so we ran to you. You were in line to get a drink. My son was getting he was getting kind of overheated, and then I had to realize later on I was also getting overheated because I mean it was in the 90s, and we're sitting next to this crowd of people. Now my brother-in-law and my father-in-law were also there with us, So, but we let them know, hey, I said, hey, my son, and they got it. I mean, he was getting a little too hot, and so we went ahead and left. The one thing we did not get a chance to do, and this was kind of my fault, we wanted to go into the pro shop just to kind of see, what they were selling. Yeah. Unfortunately, all the doors into the pro shop from outside the gate were closed.
Right.
You had to still be, and I didn't know that. And so I was like, oh.
And when I first got there because Trey actually, thanks to Trey, because he actually.
Thanks to Trey. He's the one who got us the tickets.
He actually texted me at like 1 o'clock. He was like, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to get down here?" And I'm like, "I got my kids. All right, no problem. I got you. Just head on down here. I'll transfer you the ticket." So he did that, which was great. Thank you to him for giving me giving us the tickets. But by the time we got there, I mean, it didn't look too bad getting inside. But once you got inside, apparently, and this was like around like right when the practice started, the pro shop that line was about a 45-minute wait. At 4 o'clock, it was a 2-hour wait just to get in.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So, and we left around 3. So, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably a good thing we didn't try to go into the pro shop. Maybe we will. I've never actually been to a game at the Bengals Stadium. I've only been to one NFL game ever, and that was in London, of all places. And
Okay.
I watched the Buccaneers and the Bears. It was
Was
a
that
buck.
one of those international when they took the trip out there type stuff or
Yeah, this was in 2011,
okay.
and yeah, the Buccaneers. It was actually considered a home game for them. Sad thing was the owner of the Buccaneers also owns Manchester United, and
Oh,
so
okay.
Man U, they actually had a game that day as well, and they lost. And then he turned around, he flew down to London. Of course, I mean, you're talking Manchester to London, 30-minute flight at probably. Flew down to London and went to go watch the Buccaneers lose to the Bears. So
Oh,
he was having a bad day. But I had a good time. But it's the only game I've ever been to. Um, and I don't know what that says about me, but
I would
um,
like to get a football games, but we know, I mean, Trey was talking about it to me about trying to get seats, and he's like, he's almost, he told me that there was 2 seats for him that he could get $500 a piece for a single game. But then he
oh,
was talking about season tickets where it's like $100 a month because you could do it over a payment plan. So that's about what, $1,000 a person, I believe, for
if
season
you
tickets.
let's see
It
the
was about
seat.
$50 a ticket. It was about $1,000 for 2 seats for the season. That's what, 9 games this year, what, 10 games, 12 games, including playoff, not playoffs, but preseason. And
Yeah, if
then
the if yeah. So, but I don't see myself buying season tickets anytime soon because I have other things to buy like food. And so,
wrestling stuff.
yeah, so
Just imagine WWE goes back to paid pay-per-views.
I'll tell you what,
I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, honestly, because my job situation, because I'm still looking for work, we're getting by. I mean, the bills are getting paid, so that's not a big deal.
right.
But I'm not looking to add to that because right now necessities are the name of the game.
When they were actually before the WWE Network, were you actually paying monthly or were you doing WrestleMania?
I
Because I
honest
did the 4 pay-per-views a year.
Honestly, I kind of lucked out some because we moved back to the States when I retired out of the Air Force in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And we were staying with family, my wife's mom. We stayed
Right,
with her first for a couple months, but they didn't have the room for 4 extra people. So
right.
we ended up moving into her aunt and uncle's house. Well, they had a finished basement that was like a small apartment, and we had a walkout door, so I didn't have to, until I was able to find work and able to get a house of our own, which we're in now. And by the time we moved into the house we're in now, this was in January of 2014. The network came out like a month or two later.
Oh,
And
okay.
so by the time I was going to start maybe watching the pay-per-views, and I would have only watched, like you said, like the 4 or 5 a year, like the big
Yeah.
four, now the big five, if you include Money in the Bank. And the the network had come up. The very first one I watched on the network was WrestleMania 30, and that was
Right.
in 2014. And you could tell then they were having issues with the network because it was lagging. There was a delay in some places because funny thing was Dwaylen, of course, I mean, he was watching it as well. And he texted me right when Brock Lesnar pinned The Undertaker.
Right.
And he's like, no effing way. And I figured out what he meant. And by that point, I mean, he was like 5 minutes ahead of me, and
Right.
which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking like pay-per-view type stuff, that's how much of a delay there was. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
dude, I said, I'm way behind you. And I finally figured out it
When
was about 5 minutes.
and it's unfortunate because ever since then, when you have a streaming platform which is more accessible to people, and you have millions, and I mean millions, people watching not just WWE but other stuff on Peacock, for
Mm-hmm.
example, it's going to lag,
It's going to lag.
and you just can't do nothing about it.
Well, I mean, WWE, they were going into uncharted territory for them at
Oh
the
yeah,
time, so I mean, and the network was losing money at first, which, to be honest with you, it didn't surprise me that they finally sold it to Peacock, because Peacock already have a platform, they already have the framework and everything.
was it too
The
much to maintain, or was it just business cost?
I think, to me, it was business costs, because you think about this. I think for a customer, the network is one of the best things ever, because,
I thought so.
oh yeah, you pay that $10 a month, or $9.95, whatever, but it was $10 a month plus a little over, including tax. You got that entire back catalog, the library,
Oh
not
yeah,
only the
goes
WWE,
back to the 80s.
goes back to the
Like,
80s for some of that, and they had some stuff even older than that.
mm-hmm.
Then you also had WCW's catalog. You had World Class, you had Mid South, you had some stuff from Florida, you had some of the AWA stuff. And if you were a wrestling fan like me back in the 80s, and I know you weren't even born yet, but if you remember the back in the territory days, and
Yeah,
WWE had bought all of those video libraries, and that's really what they bought the territories for after a while, including WCW. They didn't really, it wasn't about the wrestlers necessarily, but it was about those libraries. And
yeah.
so yeah, it was a great deal. But if you look at what, I think they, at one point, they had 1.5 million subscribers, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're making $15 million a month.
Right. That's a
So
good deal.
it is a good
I
deal.
mean, the other thing is too, and I think this is where it could have also hurt when you have your own channel. Yeah, I mean they took and they still take forever to upload Raw, SmackDown.
Right.
The main event took like you're still like the main event that you see now on Peacock. That's like 3 months behind, and I'm just like that's ridiculous. Like and that's like so it's just it bothers me. And then they also, I think they ran into the problem of trying to keep on creating content, which is obviously you have the library, the archives, but you
Right.
also still have to create new content like the storytelling, and that was great. But I think some of that stuff ended up costing more money that they can really bargain for, especially what I believe, didn't they stop it during the pandemic or something like that?
Maybe. I mean, I know the return on investment really was not that much, because
Right.
some of the things they had already created, they had already just to put up on the network. Because that, like that one claymation thing, my son loved watching that. You know, um,
Claymation.
I can't remember the I'd have to go onto the network to really. I mean, I didn't watch it, sit there and watch it by myself. I mean, but he always liked to watch it. They had the one, like the Camp WWE. Now that one he did not
Oh,
watch. That
okay.
was more of a cartoon. In fact, it
Yeah.
was, a cartoon, and that one was definitely adult oriented. It was not for kids. Um, but yeah, and I didn't realize they had that much of a delay as far as like putting on like the Raws and SmackDowns and main events. I mean, and I think that might be because
You're talking about Slam City.
Slam City. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yep.
And now when they put on like the weekly, like the Raw, the SmackDown main event, and I think maybe the reason why they take so long, because there's some things they have to go through and edit out. I mean, there may
True.
be, yeah, certain things they may see a fan,
Right.
kind of showing themselves, and they can't have that, you know. But go ahead.
I mean, the main event though is taped, right? They're dark matches prior to Raw or SmackDown most of the time, and they're put together. You have your separate commentators, that are basically explaining to everyone what happened throughout that week, and you only have two matches. I understand, a week out, maybe even 2 weeks out, but for being like, if you go on Peacock now and you look at main event, they were just, like last month, they were showing stuff for just right after WrestleMania.
And
And
see,
I
that
just
that's
think,
that's ridiculous. They shouldn't be waiting that long.
right. I mean, I could give you a couple weeks. I don't have a problem. You don't need to have it up by the next week. I get that. But for 3 months, I feel like now you just like you gutted main event, in my opinion, because you waited that long for tapings. I don't want to watch something that happened, for the first time, that happened 6 months ago, when we're already 6 months ahead of time, because the storylines are way different.
Right, because they don't do a lot of long-term storytelling, even though the bloodline has been lasting a while. And I think that
I mean, I
part's
think
great.
NXT Level Up is a lot sooner than that. Like when, because they post Level Up, which is like a NXT main event,
Right.
know. But
But
anyways,
before we get started on our topic, and it was actually something that you brought up to me, is when is it kind of apparent that there's going to be a split between a wrestler and a company, or the company and the wrestler, depending, or just when is it pretty apparent, or when should they basically break apart from each other? When should they part ways, even if it's only temporary? But before we start on that, I want to go ahead and I want to give some shout outs to some other podcasters. Some was a friend of ours. Obviously, give a shout out to the TNC Sports Talk.
yeah.
That'd be Justin. And
Hi.
he's been back on the air. I've been listening to him, and yeah, he also, in addition to his podcast, he actually gives his own analysis on different things, not just wrestling, but also sports. Some of a little focused on Cincinnati and San Diego, because he lives in Cincinnati, but he's originally from San Diego. But so I don't know why he didn't join the Navy like his brother, because San Diego is a big Navy town.
No. Yeah, God, but you know what? The problem is that it's so expensive out in California in general.
Very, very true. And honestly, if you would have joined the Navy just to get stationed back in San Diego, they'd have probably sent you to Norfolk or Jacksonville. But
and that's when my brother got stationed. He got to choose, and based off of the career options they gave him, because he actually trained in Chicago. His boot camp boot camp, I believe,
the Great
was in
Lakes.
Chicago. Yep. And he got to choose. It was either New York, Florida, or San Diego, and he chose San Diego just to go back home, and he thought it was going to be more cost efficient because you got to either live in the barracks or live with your parents. So it's still expensive.
It's not going to make
either
your
way
paycheck go up any higher, though, because there's not a lot of places in the States that give you COLA, the cost of living allowance.
But they do, but from my understanding, you have to be married. You have to be off the barracks.
Yep. If they give it,
you have to do it for like at least a month or two before they consider you qualified.
Yep. So,
but
of course, I want to give another shout out to Ted the Hillbilly Heel, his Hill Truth podcast. If you've never listened to it, go give it a listen. He's on just about every audio platform there is. And we're talking about wisdom. Ted is the Podfather. He is the man that we all call the Podfather. And if you listen to him, you'll know why. Because Ted, he definitely speaks some truths. And like I tell you, the Hill Truth, he's trending #1 in Antarctica and on MySpace. And if you don't think he is, prove him wrong. That's all I got to say. I also give a shout out to our friend BC Hunter, part of the Wrestling with the Truth, Wrestling with the War, Wrestling with the 80s podcast. He's on audio platforms for Wrestling with the Truth and Wrestling with the War, but on his Wrestling with the 80s is on YouTube. Go check him out. He's another great guy. He can really talk about the territory days. Love listening to him. I've actually collabed with him on a few things. We've been on his podcast. He's up on ours. We're looking to do stuff in the future. And also the Finish Your Wrestling podcast are guys out of Buffalo, New York. We had them on our show. Now we've been trying to get on their show. It's just a matter of getting our schedules. They've been ready for us. It's a matter of getting our schedules, to sync up, because we were getting ready to do it. And then Dwaylen ended up getting sick. I mean, and it was pretty bad for Dwaylen to say, I can't do it. He's pretty bad, and then just work schedules and and just life happens. But go give those guys a listen. They're awesome guys. And not only that, but one of the co-hosts always has a very creative name whenever he's announcing himself. This latest week he was Stevie Ray Cyrus.
There we go.
And I love that. I thought that was awesome. Of course, I'm thinking, it could be Stevie Ray the wrestler, but it could also be Stevie Ray Vaughan, Billy Ray Cyrus, the two musicians,
Combination.
Yep, combination of the two. The Dad World Order, that's another podcast. Justin, have you met the guys in the Dad World Order?
I have not. I think you had Mike message me a long time ago.
Probably did, yep.
About trying to first, because they're using StreamYard also.
Yeah, they are. That's right.
The work that we were trying to do, it didn't. You had to go get extra stuff. I did learn Because I think they were trying to upload, weren't they trying to upload their podcast from StreamYard to audio?
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's why I had them contact you, because I knew you were
So
using.
I
Yeah.
know you paid for a subscription on Spreaker. By the way,
Yes.
I know thanks to Spreaker, I'm pretty sure you still use Spreaker for your podcast,
I
right?
do.
Spreaker is thanks to Spreaker, you can listen to Armchair Booking Wrestling podcast on all audio platforms. It's a little help for but I found earlier this year I couldn't buy the subscription. So,
Really?
okay, what ended up happening was that they took out for the entire year, and I wanted them to take out monthly.
Ah,
But what ended
gotcha.
up happening was, so they took out the entire year. I emailed them. I was like, listen, I want to do it monthly. They just canceled it. There's a free option on Spreaker where you can upload one podcast for free and have the same thing as if you paid for the subscription. If you had the subscription, you could upload multiple different podcasts.
Right.
So, just for those who are maybe skeptic or hey, I don't want to invest so much, $200-300 a year into Spreaker, just know that there is a free option, but it's only for one podcast
It's for one
available.
podcast, and you're limited on your how much basically hard drive space. So you're limited on how many episodes you can have in archive. And once people
Yeah.
start listening to you, they find out you've done episodes before. They will go check out your back episodes.
Right. So I think they allow up to 500 hours still. They allow up to a lot more still, which
Free?
is for free.
Really? I didn't know that. So
It's just one podcast. No, it's like for I think for two podcasts it's still up to 500 hours total, I believe, right, or something like that.
something.
But like you have Cubicle Chat, you also have the armchair booking. So just to keep in, for people who are listening,
And
and you guys need to find platforms.
um yeah, like Justin just mentioned, I also have a lot of people already know that I also have my non-wrestling podcast called the Cubicle Chat, which I recorded an episode yesterday talking all about people who hate on whatever genre of music they listen to, when they say, well, today's fill in the blank, like country music is not really country music because what they listened to 20-30 years ago is totally different. It's like, well, music evolves. So that's what I'm kind of talking about, is the evolution of music. And I kind of touch on country, metal, and rap and hip hop, even though I'm definitely not an expert in rap and hip hop, but I can definitely tell the difference between some of the rap and hip hop that even I used to listen to back in the 80s and the early 90s to what's out now.
Let me ask you a
Yes.
question on that real quick.
Yeah.
What is one genre that doesn't give does not give enough credit that should be given more credit?
Oh, kind of an opinionated question, but if you're talking just musicianship, I mean, I think a lot of people would say, well, some people would definitely disagree with this. I'd say jazz. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, because jazz, I mean, there's always they said difference between like rock and jazz. Rock is three chords played to 1,000 people. Jazz is 1,000 chords played to three people.
Right.
So,
Right.
um, but yeah, speaking of music and metal, I actually had the pleasure of being invited to be a guest on the Mixtape podcast, another one that's based out of
Okay.
Cincinnati. Um, and they had their show. They really focus on 70s, 80s, 90s pop culture. And they'll have episodes where will they will discuss a certain genre of music from a certain time
Mhm.
period. Well, yesterday when we recorded, we talked about 80s metal, and they asked me, hey, give us three songs and plus a couple backups in case we end up choosing the same songs.
Right.
And we discussed it. It was me and the three hosts, Jay, um, Matt, and Kevin, and or also no, Jay, Twisted Kid, Matt, and KC Masterpiece. But and but we talked about that, and then they also invite the listeners to submit their own, because they let you put it out on Twitter and Facebook. Hey, we're going to be doing an episode of this. Give us your submissions. And so
Right.
we discussed that, and had a great time. That episode should be out in a few weeks. Within a few weeks, and I invite everybody to go check out the Mixtape podcast, and also at the same time, check out True Crime Cast. Speaking, this has been like a week of metal for me. If you listen to my podcast I put out yesterday on Cubicle Chat, I actually sent a story to True Crime Cast, and it's actually going to be in their Patreon. It's going to be a Patreon exclusive starting, I think, tomorrow, actually, because they have one, one a month that you have to be a Patreon member, which I am, to listen to it. And it was all about the Norwegian black metal scene in the early 90s. And if you are a metalhead, kept up with it, you know what was going on there, because it was, I told Jamie, it's Jamie and John, the two guys who run True Crime Cast and another one called Bless Their Hearts. And I first heard about them from the Chris Jericho podcast. They are actually friends now with Chris Jericho, and I'm actually friends with them. So, but I told Jamie, I was like, I said, I compare the stuff happening in Scandinavia with the whole black metal thing to a lot of the stuff happening back in the 90s, also with the East Coast, West Coast rap feuds going on, and people were literally killing each other over it. And that's what was happening in Norway. People were literally killing each other over super stuff there. But I believe that is all the shout outs I have today.
And if you guys missed a shout out, okay, be sure to check the description below. He lists every single shout out down there frequently.
At least when I put it on, at least when I put it on Twitter, I do. I try to get them in the main show notes as well, but
I see them all the time, Facebook and whatnot. It just, you can also check out Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast on Facebook, Twitter. Do you guys have an Instagram?
Yes, the Instagram, I don't put much on it, to be honest with you. Okay. And there's a TikTok, I put even less because I still really haven't figured out TikTok all that well, because it makes me seem really old. My daughter's a master of TikTok. I have a friend of mine in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He's a friend of mine in Waylands from high school. He has like 1.5 million, 2 million followers in TikTok.
I got about 1,500 followers, and that's it. I'm trying to get to 3,000. And the reason why I'm trying to get to 3,000 so I can actually go TikTok live on streaming service on the computer. One thing that I've learned is that once you hit 1,000, you can go TikTok live. And then once you hit 3,000, you go 1,000, you go TikTok live off your phone, right?
All right.
The problem is I like to use my phone for my phone. I don't like to use it for TikTok. I mean, I'll make a video, but
how dare you use a phone as a phone?
But I like to, but then because I do a lot of my streaming stuff on the computer, and I like the background, the setup. I like to do my videos on here or to do live streams on here, and I could do it while I'm doing work. So yeah, I'm working on it. It's a hit or miss, but yeah, TikTok's another thing.
By the way, my friend who, like I said, he's a friend of mine in Waylands, actually a really good friend of ours back from high school. His name is Big Fat. It's underscore BIGGFATT underscore. Him and his son also has a channel which has even more followers. And so they actually go on tour with different people. They've actually been to Cincinnati, and I've wanted to, hook up with him while he's been up here, go like have lunch or something. Haven't been able to, because I mean, he's just extremely busy, so. But I'm pretty sure not everybody who's listening or watching want to hear all about our friends with TikTok. So let's get into
what I do want to hear about is, and I know this before we get into our conversation. Let's hear about where you can find armchair booking stuff.
Oh, our merch
I
site.
see that mask back there, and I know you talked about the cup. So
yeah, the cup, which I can't find, and people who've long-time listeners know it's not the first time I've actually lost my coffee mug. It makes me sad every time. You can find it at tpublic.com/users/armchair-booking-podcast. Just like you can find TNC Sports Talk merch also at TeePublic. And what's your URL?
I think it's TNC Sports Talk, or what you can do for me, TNC Sports Talk. You could head to my website at www.tncsportstalkshow.com, and there's a link up in the header, up in the main menu bar. It'll just take you right to the website. You can find all the episodes, YouTube's audio blogs that I write some once in a while, video stuff like that. You can find all that stuff on my website, which I would hopefully one day Armchair Booking will get a web page.
Maybe. I mean, I ain't working right now. It's not like I'm doing anything else.
Well, I mean, it's a number one for me. I find it because what's great about it is that it automatically uploads everything you post or publish, and you could direct people to that website, and they could find everything your all your social media contacts, all your audio platforms, your videos, anything upcoming. You can post up news, highlight stories, stuff like that, and then even your like I say your store page, and it'll just take you to so that when you're talking to someone and you want people to subscribe to you, just send them to your website. They can find everything under that page.
You know what? We'll talk after we're done recording.
I know, I'm just
Yeah.
just throwing it out there.
But you threw me an idea,
Okay.
and you said the inspiration from your idea, for today's show, because a lot of times whenever Joelle and I we have a guest on the show, we actually let them usually choose a topic, because if there's something they want to talk about, we'll let them actually throw an idea our way, and there have been some where we're like, no, but this right here I actually liked. And
Okay.
like you said, at what point is it time to part ways with a company or superstar in different situations? And
Yeah.
then before we start recording, you mentioned specifically Bray Wyatt.
That's the most latest situation I've heard of. Now, when I talk about situations, we talk about maybe people failing drug tests time and time again, or getting in trouble with local law. We talked about violation of contracts. Like Mandy Rose. With the WWE or last year, I believe, right? Because
Oh,
she kind of went against her contract. Was it really necessary
it
to
wasn't. It
part
wasn't.
ways, or?
That's right. It wasn't OnlyFans, but it was something similar.
But WWE asked her to take it down, and she refused to because she was becoming popular on it.
And it was using
And
her real name. It wasn't even the name Mandy
that too.
Rose.
So that was my biggest thing is, at what point, because I mean, we've seen professional wrestling companies give athletes chances after chances after the chances, and they hope that these athletes can, overcome and learn from their mistakes, but sometimes they don't. So at what point in situations is it just time to just part ways? Because, okay, for example, in AEW, CM Punk was getting into a lot of beef backstage, notoriously known for like the stuff with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, right?
I mean,
And
they literally got into an actual fight backstage.
And Tony Khan could have been like, nope, we don't want that. They originated they're one of the originals for AEW. We're going to go with them. See you later, CM Punk. But CM Punk is back. So, Tony Khan, this is an example, has decided to give him another chance. But, if you were a owner of a wrestling company and you had that situation, what would you do? I mean, every company, every story, every situation is different.
With CM Punk specifically, I'm not high on CM Punk. I like his stuff in the ring, but you have all the baggage that comes with him, because if you know the history, of course, this is not the first time CM Punk has had disagreements, like very, very public disagreements with management. And that's one of the things, if you are in any kind of position to where you're going to have like a public forum, you don't publicly bash your boss. That's not just in wrestling, that's with any job. I see people doing it on social media all the time. I hate my job, and the next thing you know, I just got fired. I don't know why. I was like, well, I can figure it out real quick,
Right.
And CM Punk, not only did he do it, another kind of rule, and I know this may go totally against what some people think with jobs, especially me. I mean, I actually fairly recently left a job. You never saw me once bash my boss on social media. You never saw me bash. I've still not bashed the company. I just said I left for personal reasons, a lot due to my physical and mental health. But you never let your boss get blindsided. CM Punk, he walked into that press conference, got on a microphone, and started bashing Tony Khan, who's sitting 6 feet away from him. And Tony Khan said,
very surprised,
and and people say, well, he was agreeing with him. I'm like, I don't think he was necessarily agreeing with him. I just think Tony Khan was kind of.
What else do you do? Because you step in and say, hey, all right, that's enough. You're letting your champion not speak free willingly. I mean, same thing that happens with MJF. MJF keeps on poking the bear, even though, and Tony Khan seems to be surprised time and time again. And, maybe that is AEW's, issue with press conferences, that they don't really give them, hey, here, you won the title, strictly speak on behalf of the title only. Don't bring up anything outside. So maybe more of a controlled setting, but yeah, I mean, I've seen your point,
Yeah,
but CM Punk's not the only person that has done that.
right. And normally when you say you don't let your boss get blindsided, what that means is you just got in trouble for something messed up, something. You better tell your boss instead of your boss hearing it from somebody else.
Right.
That's what it comes down to, because you don't want to he or she hear about it and then come to you asking you about it. You want to be the one to say, hey, I messed up. Here's, or, hey, something happened, and there's a situation that's going to affect your work. I mean, and of course I know with wrestling sometimes it's different, because professional wrestling is something it's entertainment or sport, and just same thing with any other sports that, like football or baseball or
Yeah.
MMA or anything. You see the baseball players, the football players, they'll get up in a press conference and they'll bash the team that they're on. And then next thing you know, well, the original question was, when is it time for them to part ways? Well, that's a perfect time right there. Because if I was the
Right.
owners, I'd be like, you're gone. And you want to get your lawyers involved. Let's get the lawyers involved, because I'd also have to put in a contract. You will not disparage the organization you are part of, because for one thing, it's just dumb to do that anyway. And
Yeah.
but I mean, there could be other reasons with Bray Wyatt, specifically. I mean, I feel Bray Wyatt, he's anymore, he's perpetually injured, and I hate that, because I like Bray Wyatt. My personal preference, also, by the way, is the Cape Fear Bray Wyatt. The
Okay.
one, yeah, with um the Wyatt family,
Yeah.
and when you had the kids out there around the ring with the sheep's mask on. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I liked that version of Bray Wyatt. I was not a fan of the Happy Fun Club Bray Wyatt.
No, I am fan of the Fiend from time and time.
Yeah,
Like the same thing
time
with
to
the
time.
Demon. You know, coming up SummerSlam this Saturday, August 5th in Detroit. I know you'll probably do an episode on that later this week, but
Maybe, because that's
hopefully.
something that Dwayne and I normally we give our predictions. Um, so I might be doing it, but we'll have to see, because this Friday afternoon, I want to be able to watch SummerSlam live, because this Friday afternoon, my wife and I, we are actually going away for the weekend. This will be the first.
Well,
Her birthday is this week, and so this is the first time.
happy early birthday
Yep, this will be
to
the
her.
first time we've had a chance to go away, just us. We got to looking at it. Let's see, since I
Mean
think,
even Thursday maybe, and
well,
listen,
her
you could
birthday is
always.
Thursday. I'm not
Oh,
definitely not
okay.
recording Thursday, so so
um,
so the prediction show might not actually happen.
We'll talk
That
about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there'll be
So,
conversations about it. We'll try to. What I've been doing lately is trying to encourage you to just keep it going,
oh, I
one
appreciate
way or
that.
the
So,
factor. Anything that make it possible. Um, all right. So So let me go out and just say this. First and foremost, I will always defend the athlete over the company when it comes down to taking personal time away for mental, personal, physical, any means necessary. If you feel
yeah.
like you have to, John Moxley, prime example. We've seen this in football last year where several athletes took time off during the season because they were not mentally stable to, to have themselves on the field. If you are put in a situation where you don't feel 100% to compete and you say you cannot compete, I will always defend you and support you in the decision that you make. Now, the problem with this situation is that all we are being told is that there are undisclosed injuries that Bray Wyatt has been or problems that he's been taking care of over the last 7 months. Because I
And
mean, last time he wrestled was against LA Knight in that Mountain Dew
that,
neon
yeah,
glow
that,
fight at the Royal Rumble. We haven't seen him since. And if he's taking personal time, by all means take it. I'm not gonna, and I don't feel a company should necessarily part ways. They should find ways to work with you on, all right, how can we get you back on TV in some way, shape, or form? Because you do still have obligations to meet, but we want you to take the personal care that you need.
For that, I mean, because mental health is a big thing that lately, and I realize I say lately, I mean, it's been, probably over the better part of 10 years or so, there's been a big focus on mental health, especially with men, because it's always been said, well, men, you just suck it up and go through it. And by the way, the highest rate of people taking their lives is unfortunately men, and because you hit certain points where you just can't handle it. And Dwayne and I, we are big advocates of mental health treatment, because he and I both we've been very open about our issues with mental health. I mean, we both have different, things. I
Yeah.
mean, I had a lot of trauma in my life. And then I also spent 20 years in the military, including, some deployments, and I mean, I won't go too in detail with that, but, but I mean, I see a therapist now, so I have no issues whatsoever admitting that. But when it comes to mental health, and like Bray Wyatt, I mean, because I always thought his issues were more of a physical nature. I didn't realize he was having mental health issues as well. But if he is, you know what? Go take care of him. That to me would have to take priority, because you don't want to force somebody to be in a situation where they are not 100%, or at least pretty close to 100% mentally capable of actually doing their job in the ring. Because a lot of times in the ring, okay, yeah, the action is real. Yeah, they're in there, they're doing some pretty bad things to each other, but at the same time, they're taking care of each other. And if you're having a mental lapse, that's when people get hurt for real, because that's when botches happen. And sometimes those botches can lead to broken bones. Or like in the case of Big E, and this wasn't a mental lapse, this is a case of, somebody who, by all intents and purposes, anybody else, he could do that over the head, belly to belly suplex, but not with Big E, who was 300 pounds of solid muscle, and he came down on his head. And, so take care of yourself, take care of your body. I do wish Bray Wyatt would come back. I hope he would come back with the Cape Fear character. But if he's leaving because he's took care of his mental health, then I applaud that.
Let me ask you this: since we're talking about Bray Wyatt's character and his mental health, I mean, I know he loves those characters. He has a novel of characters that he likes to display and tell in WWE. He wishes he could, but playing such a dark character, such a mystique character like Bray Wyatt, and not many athletes can do it. It does take also a physical and mental toll on your brain, because you have to be able to switch it. Like for example, and I know there wasn't too much to think about when it came down to the character of Kane, but we know Glenn Jacobs as this nicest guy on the planet Earth, at least so described. But yet, when he was wearing that mask in the big rest suit and everything was dark and in fire and all that stuff, he had to turn it off just like that. I'm sure, over time when you play that character, 300 days of the year, I'm pretty sure it does take a toll on you, especially if that's not who you generally are. No?
Maybe, because I don't think anybody could pull off the Bray Wyatt character, just like I don't think anybody could pull off the Undertaker's character when he was, the Phenom, or he was. Now, I wasn't a fan of
Ministry of Darkness.
Yeah, the Ministry of Darkness. Now, that one, the Satanic one, I wasn't a big fan of, and even
You're
Mark
crossing
Calloway.
some boundaries.
Even Mark Calloway, he wasn't a fan of it either, and he actually went to Vince McMahon and said, "No, we're," because he had a lot of personal changes happening in his life.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I can't do that character anymore."
Yeah.
And he told Vince McMahon, "I'm done with it." And if you notice, that's the one character, one version of the Undertaker that never came back.
Oh yeah,
because that one was, like you said, it was crossing too many lines. But I mean, they're all kind of based on Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan, to me, was the first one to really have that kind of character. And but Kevin Sullivan, who was actually a very devout Catholic, was able to talk, I mean, about some pretty evil things. I mean, if you go and look at some of the the interviews Kevin Sullivan did. And if you were to find some of the old interviews, like in the old the magazines that he was doing, it made me actually look some stuff up. And I mean, Kevin Sullivan
Right.
was talking about, like, I mean, they said, oh, he's a devil worshiper, and he was talking like that. But then you find out later on, Kevin Sullivan, he's a very devout Irish Catholic. And, but it's just like the lead singer of Slayer, Tom Araya. Of course, if you
Yeah.
listen to Slayer, you don't have to listen to them necessarily to know what their image is. Tom Araya is also a devout Catholic. And he even
Yeah.
says, I don't, and for him, he has to kind of turn it on just for the theatrics and then turn it off. And so, and if, maybe that's because the Fiend was a lot different from, the Cape Fear, the
Yeah.
Cape Fear character, the Max Cade type character. And because that one was kind of like a cult leader, but it wasn't, I never felt like it was demonic. The Fiend is literally like a demon.
Yeah.
And maybe that was too hard, but I don't think that's the issue they're having with Bray Wyatt, me personally.
Okay.
I think because he was getting injured, even back when he was the Cape Fear Bray Wyatt.
Sure.
And so, I
So,
mean, and
do you
he's
think
pretty
it's a lot
intense.
of injuries? Injuries just catch up with you. I mean, we're just kind of also rolling into the period of professional wrestling where we want you to say something, or even if you don't say something, we're taking all caution measures. Because I remember, even what in the 2010s, people who miss wrestling, you fall behind in line. If you're not there each and every week on the screen, so
You'll lose your
there's a
spot.
lot of right, and so a lot of athletes will fight through concussions, will fight through broken bones and torn ligaments
Well, they're
just
not
to
they're
remain
not
the top
necessarily
spotlight.
being well, they're not necessarily being forced to now. That was an old territory thing. Bill Watson was notorious for it down in
Yeah.
Louisiana, because Steve Dr. Death Williams got a legitimate eye injury. He had to have
Mm-hmm.
108 stitches put in his eye. And he said, hey, Bill, supposed to have a match tomorrow. What am I supposed to do? And he said, you're going to go out and wrestle.
Yeah.
And he forced the man to wrestle with 108 fresh stitches that he had put in his eye. Now, I don't
Right.
think that was the right thing to do. And I know Steve Dr. Death Williams, he was one of the toughest, like legitimately toughest people ever in wrestling. I don't care what
Right.
happened in the Brawl for All. Steve Dr. Death Williams was, yeah, he was legit. He played football and wrestled at the University of Oklahoma, if that says anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, but with Bray Wyatt, I think a lot of part of him, and I do kind of want to move away from Bray Wyatt and talk about some other
Yeah.
ones, but
Absolutely.
um, with Bray Wyatt, Vince McMahon has always said he does not understand the character, just like he didn't understand Malachi Black's character.
Do
And
you need to understand it in order to make it a hit? Because I mean, a lot of people, I don't even think I understood it all the way, but it was something that drew your attention to the screen every Friday night on SmackDown.
I think if the fans understand it, that's who matters. If the
Okay.
fans understand it, and the people who maybe, the people in creative who
Yeah.
are coming up with stuff, and, but of course, if you notice it, this may just be a coincidence. They always had different things to Vince, but then Vince was more or less fired, for lack of better terms. When everything broke out last year,
Right.
all of a sudden he was away from creative. And if you
Mm-hmm.
notice, the product improved because now they didn't have to run everything. They didn't have to filter everything through Vince, who would change
Sure.
stuff last minute to something that he wanted or he understood. And he was like, well, he wasn't listening to the fans. And if you notice, Bray Wyatt came back, because Bray Wyatt, he came back at which pay-per-view? I don't think it was the one in
The
Cardiff.
Royal Rumble.
Was it the Rumble? No, was it the Rumble? Was it?
Well, no, okay, so I'm sorry. He didn't come back at the Rumble. He came back last year. I thought it was in Cardiff. At
Clash at the Castle?
I believe so.
You know what? Well,
You're gonna have to do some
I'm going
research.
to have to look
Well,
at
so
that,
while
but
you're looking that up, let me just go ahead and ask you on this topic. In this situation, whatever Bray Wyatt's dealing with today, okay, whatever keeps him away from television, is this time? Is it time to part ways with him because he is taking, he's away from the business for this long?
I honestly, I think it for Bray Wyatt, really Wyndham Rotunda, his actual name. I think it would be best for him to leave WWE go somewhere, not necessarily AEW. I mean, he can go
Yeah.
anywhere. Although
I feel
AEW,
like Impact Wrestling will probably, because I think he'll be able to also have the control, like the freedom, because the freedom for his controlled, segments and his, the characters that he likes to, display out there.
well, I mean, he could, and as long as he did not use the name Bray Wyatt or the Fiend or whatever, he could
Mm-hmm.
still come back with that. I mean, he could even just go with his real name. And his brother could also come back. Bo Dallas. I can't think of what his actual first name is, but also Rotunda,
Yeah.
Mike Rotunda's kid, in which that's actually something else. Their dad, Mike Rotunda, also known as IRS, was one of the people who was let go from WWE last year or in the
Mm.
past couple of years. He was one of the people when they started doing their mass,
So
firings, basically.
maybe okay. So there's a lot of things on why Bray is out for a long time, and I don't know if we will truly understand at this point of time why he has been absent for so long. Whether it is personal issues, whether it's personal injury and mental health, whatever. I know a lot of times, WWE likes to cover things up. You know, so but right now what we're thinking of, you're paying him, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're paying him a lot of money too. You're not paying him a couple 100,000. You're paying him maybe a couple million, right? To sit at home, take care of his well being. That's great and all, but you can invest into that, into someone else that can impact your business for the better.
It was Extreme Rules, by the way.
Extreme Rules.
Yeah, it was in October.
Okay.
So he came back at Extreme Rules, but he didn't actually wrestle for like another 3 or 4 months because we even had a podcast saying, "Hey, when's Bray Wyatt going to actually wrestle again?"
Yeah, we thought it was going to be Survivor
Yeah,
Series.
yeah, and he didn't, and then he had a couple matches, but they said, "Well, he got hurt," and it's like, then yeah, maybe y'all brought him back a little bit too early because that's one of the things why Randy Orton would come back and then leave, come back and then leave because Randy Orton was also getting hurt. Now, that's not
Right.
saying anything about like their um I guess physicality, their ability to take injuries. Because I actually saw footage, and you can find us on YouTube. There was a sportscaster who kept calling Randy Orton soft
Oh yeah.
because he was gotten injured, and Randy Orton confronted him. He said, "Why do you keep calling me?" And this is when Randy Orton, he was just, he had a really bad temper at the time. Now he's, of course, he's matured. But
Yeah.
I would definitely wouldn't say they're soft. I mean, because what they're doing, you can't be soft and do what they're doing for a living to begin with. But what I think it is, they might be coming back too early because they're not letting their injuries completely heal up. And not only that, but if you've ever had any kind of broken bone, anything like that, it is never healed back to the point that it was before. It's always going to be more susceptible to
Mm-hmm.
injury than anything else. It doesn't matter. And both Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, their styles of wrestling, when they do their moves, it's not subtle at all.
Right.
They're very impactful. And
They're even talking about Randy Orton, and if he does come back, he may not be, he may be limited on when he could do the RKO because he's had the fusion in his neck, I believe.
right, and he takes the full
So,
impact of the RKO on his
so,
back.
and this is a lot of people don't. I mean, wrestling fans will know, non-wrestling fans will probably not know as much, but they put on performances 4 or 5 nights a week. We only are used, normal fans are used to seeing what's on Raw, on SmackDown, on pay-per-views. That's 3 or 4 times a month. Well, they got live shows. They just had one down in Mexico a couple of weeks. They had one back here in Cincinnati, back in last month or so. And they are, or 2 months ago, and they will compete on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I mean, they only get like 2 days off a week,
and
majority of the
and they're
time.
not
So
they're not 2 consecutive days either.
no, yeah. But still, I mean, I do remember they used to put on 2 or 3 shows one night. You go down in San Diego, put a show down at at the stadium, at the arena in San Diego, go up to LA later on that day and put on another match. But still, that takes a lot of toll on you. You know.
And well, another reason though, not just like the injury part, or somebody
Yeah.
just you know, like Bray Wyatt right now, his character's in a holding pattern because
Yeah.
nobody knows what's going on, and people have actually lost interest because he's not being seen. But you may have another situation, kind of like Drew McIntyre. Um, he was gone for 3 months and he just reappeared. because
Was he gone because he was also injured, right? Wasn't he taking care of some
well,
injuries?
he was, it wasn't like any one specific injury. He was taking care of like nagging, like small injuries,
Right.
which the small injuries, if you don't take care of them, they will turn into bigger injuries. That's why my wife is having foot surgery here in a few months or here in a few weeks, actually, because she had something, she didn't realize that she had a torn tendon until, a few days ago. Now she's going to have surgery to fix it because it got worse and worse. She had no idea that's what it actually was. But same thing with Drew McIntyre. I mean, of course, Drew McIntyre, he's a big man. And so
Yeah.
when he comes down, I mean, that's a big man. It doesn't matter how well he can take a flat back bump. I mean, he's going to have injuries. Every wrestler is going to have injuries. And so he was actually gone for a few months, but his contract was also up. And so that was actually something else. Drew McIntyre, he commands an audience. He will have people to come in there and watch him, because I mean, I'm a big Drew McIntyre fan myself.
Well,
And
he's also facing at the time for the last several months. As a matter of fact, this past year, he's been wrestling bigger guys too, where she really do just make it 10 times worse. So, Drew McIntyre is dealing with some injuries. He's also dealing with a contract problem, which we know, from time and time again, contract issues are one of their own. Maybe is, hey, they so and so wants so much money, so and so wants so much time, within the means. We just saw Roman Reigns a couple years ago get this exclusive deal from the WWE where he gets almost pick and choose his schedule. And, right now, as of right now, he's not promoted in any of the upcoming premium lives after SummerSlam for the remainder of the year. So, but let's take a look at someone like, you talk about Big E. Braun Strowman just got done going through neck surgery. Now,
I think
neck
honestly,
surgery,
I think Braun Strowman's done.
I think so.
I
At least
think
with the WWE, he may have
um,
another crack in a smaller indie, place, but
I mean, they never could get him as over as what they should have. He was never properly utilized, especially when they had him portrayed as being stupid. I cannot stand when they do that with a character, because, and honestly, that's your hint right there that you should probably leave the company, is when they are treating you like that. Because to me, it almost seems like, okay, you're in a relationship now. You've been in relationships in the past. You know, you just know when you're about to split. Same with me. My wife and I have been married for 24 years, but obviously I've had relationships in the past, and you just knew when you were going to break up. Same thing with jobs. I knew when I was going to leave my last job. Just like before that, I knew when it was time for me to retire from the military. And but that wasn't in the public eye. And I know you've had coworkers, same thing. You knew they were about to leave, or they were they were done.
Yeah.
They were checked out. Some of them, they may just been going through the motions because they are like that close to retiring and they can collect a pension.
Right.
And, but it's the same thing with wrestling. When you see the characters losing over and over and over again, Malachi Black, which one does he go by now?
I think he goes by Malachi Black.
Black. When he was still Aleister Black, he was another one. Vince McMahon didn't understand it, so he never got a great big push. His character, I mean, is a little extreme. It's kind of funny to talk about the Norwegian black metal stuff. Well, that's actually the kind of stuff that he himself is actually into.
You also build for Aleister Black. He built himself so much in NXT that you're almost shocked that it didn't work. I mean, sometimes, and this is where, I mean, he wasn't the only one that did it. It was the period where a lot of NXT talent should have got called up a lot sooner. And because they took so long, they just never fully, either they took so long that their call up date expired. Like, for example, Adam Cole, he should have been on the main roster if he was going to be a long time ago. And I think because they kept him down in NXT, it just expired and it wouldn't make sense for him to be on the main roster. It wouldn't do nothing. Tommaso Ciampa is a prime example. I think he was a great athlete. Obviously, injuries got the better of him, especially when he was going with the feud with Johnny Gargano. But he was someone who should have been called up years ago. and he never did. And I don't feel like he makes that impact that he had, the fan base he had down at NXT, that he was beloved. I don't think he has the same impact on the fans on Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, because sometimes, I mean, it doesn't translate from the smaller crowds into the bigger crowds, and you're not just doing it in the performance center, you're doing it across the country and sometimes in different
Right.
countries.
They're also, and I think here's also another big issue, and I apologize if I'm speaking on top of you in this
Oh,
sense,
you're
but
fine.
they also didn't allow Aleister Black. First of all, when he did get called up, they changed it. They didn't let him continue doing what he was doing down at NXT that worked. They tried to re-image him. And for two, they didn't allow him to have enough time with that successful, success to build. And one thing that I've learned building, when you move from NXT to WWE, it's from minor leagues to major leagues. It takes a wrestler an average
That is a
about
perfect
12 to
analogy.
16 weeks, right? So 12 to 16 weeks to know if you're established from the fans. Okay, because that means that's 3 to 4 months consistently each and every week to come in and just do the same thing over and over again. Same thing with Karrion Kross. But you can't come out there every week and squash somebody and not move up the chain and really dig yourself into a feud with somebody, that where you're making forward progress. What, for example, Karrion Kross, right? I feel like he's kind of been stuck in crosswords because when he first came up, he was just for nonstop. He was building himself with um with just squashing people with mostly like those indies that they get in the local area that get called up for the one night hey, I got a squash match for you to just take a beating from this guy because we want to promote him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And you don't let what worked down at NXT develop into the main roster.
And Joel and I, we've actually hit on this sometimes. There's been occasions where they have actually brought a person up from NXT to the main roster because they're successful down in NXT. It's like, all right, they bring them up, and then they totally change what they're doing, so they're not even getting a chance to put over what they're doing, and that's kind of a Vince call. And when Vince came back, by the way, that's when all of a sudden Bray Wyatt wasn't appearing as much anymore, even though he had not really, because Vince McMahon, and I think that might be a personal issue because he let Mike Rotunda go, Bray Wyatt's dad. So, but yeah, but I think whenever, just like former boss of mine in the Air Force, because he was getting ready to retire after I think he had done 23 years at the time. And let's talk with him one day, and I'm still friends with him and his wife today. And I asked him, I was like, hey, Dale, I was like, how do you know when it's time to retire? And he said, oh, you'll know. I was like, well,
right.
What are the signs? And he said, when you just don't enjoy it anymore. He said, when you wake up and you're like, I don't even like doing this. I don't even like putting on the uniform. I like my coworkers, but
Derek Jeter said this the best for baseball. He knew it was time to retire because when he woke up, he felt going to work was a job.
Yeah.
You feel like you have to get up and you actually have to go to work or go to your job. That's when it's time to find something different or to retire, like, in that case. But so, all right. So Bray Wyatt, you would kind of, all right, let's part ways. Let's part ways on best of terms as much as possible. Maybe there's an opening in the future, but as of right now, you've just been gone for so long. We're moving forward from you. Plus, right now, I don't realistically think, unless you're coming back at SummerSlam, any storylines that you somewhat fit. I mean, I know that there are conversations and rumors about an outside interference that's costing Cody Rhodes his match on Saturday, whether that was Randy, whether that was Bray. I've seen that on social media. I've heard about it. Don't know, but I think that's the kind of like the last, at least for me, that last standpoint. If you don't see, him by SummerSlam, maybe just best to cut ways. Braun Strowman, right? Or maybe just, hey, it's time to part ways. You were just using as a simple tag team match to fill in a match card on SmackDown. Maybe it's just time to part ways. Big E, he's been on the show for, he obviously had that injury. I mean, I know it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, neck injury, you don't mess around with.
He may not come back even
They've
the same way that he should be.
and they've actually kind of come to terms with that Big E might not come back at all because
Okay.
you know, because I mean, when you have to have surgery on your neck, he may not get cleared by a doctor
And if you come
because
back, maybe come back as a manager, commentator,
yeah,
backstage
now that wouldn't
assistant,
because Big E is actually he's very well spoken, so yeah, put him as a commentator.
maybe even
Um,
an ambassador. I mean, I know Titus O'Neil has done a
maybe
really good job. I mean, Big E's a pretty good. I mean, the New Day was a pretty good ambassador for a long time when they were, the New Day clicked, and was growing.
the New Day
So
they've hit the point where they actually don't need the tag titles anymore to get over.
no,
I mean, they are just hey, it's New Day, all right,
right.
everybody loves the New Day. But it's kind of funny you mentioned Cody Rhodes because he was actually the next person I was going to mention. Cody
Yeah.
Rhodes, when he left the WWE in what, 2014, 2015, he left because they were, he did not like what they were doing with him. He was going, what they were doing with him, he was never going to be more than middle of the mid card. And at best,
When he
because
went down to Stardust, I think you put
yeah,
him as a dark match. I mean, or main event. I mean, that's what he was at the time.
and we saw, my family and I, we went and watched. It was a SmackDown taping. This is when SmackDown was being taped on Tuesdays, and then being
Oh yeah, I
shown
love
on
those days.
Thursdays. Yep. So we went down to Cincinnati to what is now what Heritage Bank Arena,
Yep.
whatever it was then.
It used to be U.S. Bank
U.S.
Arena, I
Bank
believe.
Arena. Yep, it was U.S. Bank Arena at the time, and we watched the SmackDown tapings. And the Cody Rhodes, the only time you saw him was I don't remember who he was even in a feud with at the time, but he was standing. We were actually back of the hard cam, so we never would have gotten on there. Of course, the ramp is on our left. The commentators were over to our right, and Cody, he was dressed up like Stardust, and like he was like in the
Right.
corner with. He actually had two minions or acolytes, whatever you want to call them, with him. I don't even remember who they were, to tell you the truth. I
I don't
think
even remember either.
was it Ascension, maybe another team that was grossly underused.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
they should have been tag team champions at one point. I mean,
yeah,
they were compared to the Road
they
Warriors
were.
in a sense, and it was such a disappointment.
Right. And so Cody, I mean, and he was putting his all into the character. I mean, you could tell that because but he's got the star on and
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 while you're at the Ascensions, just for a second, I'm going to throw in Viking Raiders right there. I hate how they're being used. They're such a
right.
dominant team. They should be dominant, and they're just being jobbers right now to Chad Gable and Otis. And I don't like Valhalla. Great athlete. I understand she took some time away. They left and they came
Right.
back, but they should be champions on top of the division. They should be the pedestal right now in the Raw tag team divisions, going after Kevin and Sami Zayn.
Because
I mean,
they are a team. They're not a collection of individuals. Because I mean, as much as what I like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, they're not the team of Kevin and Sami. They are
what
two
was that
individual wrestlers
team
put
that
together.
Paul Ellering brought? I forgot the name of them.
I forgot because
I know they were then.
he was their manager in NXT, and when they
Yep,
came up, they said, "Okay, we don't need you anymore."
they should have
Now
brought him up
they
there
should have
with
kept
them.
Paul Ellering there, and it was like, okay. I mean, I don't get why, because that team it lasted like a month or two, and they were I don't even remember the
And I
name of them
know,
now.
I guess I heard
I
that they
remember I
were
liked them.
unsafe,
I do
but
remember I liked them, but it
and with
just
Paul Ellering, he could have been the spokesperson, and we would have saw like I don't know. I expected us to see domination from them, and it
and we
just I
didn't.
don't know went south so quickly. Back to Stardust though. Another couple people you could put in that category around the same time. Heath Slater. Well,
Yep.
I mean, Heath Slater was still with the company, but Jinder Mahal, Drew McIntyre, these were part of 3MB that were jobbers
Mm-hmm.
that had to you're kind of getting around to leaving the company to go build up somewhere else to come back.
Yep.
These were athletes are, hey, it's time to go. I'm not being utilized. Let me go find success somewhere else and then come back.
I mean, and it may have been because they may have had some kind of personal conflict. That's what happened with McIntyre. He actually had so he rubbed somebody the wrong way, and he'll even admit it. They've actually showed him in interviews. WWE have actually had interviews with him, and he said, yeah, he was rubbing people the wrong way. His first stint wasn't getting over. He left, built himself, came back, and now, of course, now he's a former champion, Royal Rumble winner, and he was going to be competing for the title again. With Cody Rhodes, of course, he left, went to Ring of Honor, well, Impact, and then Ring of Honor.
Mhm.
Impact, he actually won the world title. And so, I mean, it was the NWA world title,
Yeah.
kind of like that belt sitting right back there, the one at the bottom, not the one on top, but it was the 10 pounds of gold. And then he left there, went to Ring of Honor, and of course was tearing it up there and really building himself. Then he went and started his own company
Right.
and really elevated himself up to that level, that rare level that you don't see a lot of people attaining.
Yeah.
And then he hit the point, well, it was too crowded at
I've
the
done all
top.
I can. Well, I mean, he's also
Yeah,
almost done everything he can possibly do.
right.
He did have some unfinished business in the WWE.
And when he parted ways with AEW, I mean, if you notice, there's no animosity. It was
No.
just, it was time to go. And that's what they all felt. It's like, because it was too crowded at the top, because you had him and you had, um, oh my Lord, Kenny Omega, and you had,
Kenny Omega,
um, the two brothers,
Young Bucks.
Young Bucks. Thank you. They were all up there as executives. And so Cody's like, okay, you know what? My job is done here. I'm going to go and I'm going to,
Right.
because Cody had a lot to prove. And of course, he shows up at Mania. And then the next pay per view, he gets hurt, like right off, which was, oh man, that was just some bad timing. But he's came back
Right.
and he's
And he's
not
building.
mid. Yeah, exactly. He's not mid carding,
Right.
but he's
Well, yet again, he is. I mean,
but he is.
he
He's
is
like the
taking
top of the mid
approach.
card because he's having to rebuild that from where he got hurt. So they can't put him directly in the main event.
And they could, they could, but
They,
what I like the way that they're doing it is because now they're giving him something to fight for. And WWE can bring him in and say, "Hey, you're going to be the face of Raw." And initially, without the title, I mean, I know there's that cliche saying that if you hold the title, you're the face of the company, right, or face of the brand.
right.
Seth Rollins, face of Raw. Cody Rhodes could be arguably right there in that mix, right?
Oh, I don't think Cody Rhodes would need the title to be the
No.
face of whatever he's part of, because Cody Rhodes has actually built himself to where he's gotten bigger than his brother Dustin, and
Yeah.
Dustin was huge.
Yeah.
Goldust character, should never have worked, but it did.
Well,
And
he was
people,
one of the few characters that worked so well for being a mid card.
right? And I mean, but he was Intercontinental Champion. I think he and Cody, weren't they tag team champions at one point? And
I believe so.
and Dustin Rhodes is in his 50s, and he's even said on Twitter, I mean, he just became a granddad, and he knows he's not going to be wrestling too much longer,
Yeah.
But Cody's gotten even bigger than Dustin, and Dustin has hit some heights that he really was not supposed to hit with that character. But I mean,
he was able to be a mid card fitting in with Stone Cold, either The Rock, The Undertaker, Kane, all the people at the top card. He would Goldust.
Right.
I think saved himself for some reason. It just miraculously worked so well. But yeah, you're right. Cody Rhodes is such, I think he's in a universe of his own. I think even if you ask me today, if it's him or for Roman Reigns, I choose Cody any day, to be honest, because I know what you get out of Cody Rhodes, and he will always fight for that next thing. Roman Reigns is at the point where, I mean, I know it's given to him, but he just, he sits there talking about Goldust. We talk about some old timers. Okay, in this, when is it time to really understand as part ways? WWE has done this with Goldberg. I think WWE understands that they used all they could use out of Goldberg, and it was just time to, listen, I got nothing for you. It doesn't make us money. It's also going to then just sabotage your career, because I've seen that happen. Undertaker, I mean, there's that argument he should have retired when he lost the streak. That was 10 years ago. Right? Oh, coming up 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And, coming up with some wrestlers coming up today, like, for example, Chris Jericho looks like $1 million and he's like in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Sting knows that he's going to be retiring soon. Dustin knows he's retiring soon. So at what point do you, as a veteran, because I know companies like to give veterans their, credit where credit's due and let you end on your own terms. But sometimes you guys have to understand it's just time to go. And as maybe, I think I saw on AEW Collision, I believe Billy Gunn, I don't know if it's working a storyline, but he
No,
took off his boots.
he dropped the boots in the ring. He's done. That's
I think so.
yeah.
I mean, even though he looks incredible, I
Yeah.
just don't know. You have to ask yourself. I mean, I know if Rob Van Dam could still compete, he still tries to compete once in a while. These veterans though have to know when it's time to hang up the boots, so where they can leave on one good terms, and two, they don't start leaving scars on their career.
I've never seen a wrestler leave their boots in the ring and then come back and wrestle a match.
Yeah.
Yeah, Triple H, when he announced he was retiring from in ring, now his was health issues because
Mm-hmm.
he basically Triple H almost died. A lot of people don't get that. He almost
Yeah.
died. His wife Stephanie and their three daughters were in the hospital, and they were scared that they were going to have to say goodbye to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he managed to get through it. But he had a defib put in. So he is done. And so when he
Yeah.
announced it, he had his boots with him, and he placed them in the ring and walked out. And the symbolism of that is when you leave your boots in the ring, you're done.
You got to be done. You
You got
have
to
to
be
be.
done. Just like I don't know if you watched the show Heels. Um, they
Did
actually
that work the same way with the Undertaker? Because it wasn't his boots, but it was his
it was,
remarkable symbol of his cap, jacket and gloves. But then he put it back on.
but he put it back on because this was Mark Calloway himself, and I don't know if you've
Yeah.
watched that series that they had on him, where
Mm-hmm.
he was actually the only time he ever spoke as Mark Calloway. All of a sudden, I mean, he was no longer a character, but he said the match that he had with Roman Reigns, he basically said it stunk off the joint,
Right.
and it was not a good match. I mean, he was not
Mm-hmm.
100%. I mean, he's even admitted it.
I
And
thought
he
I felt it was as good as he was going to give at the time against someone like Roman Reigns.
right,
But
but with him leaving his stuff in the ring, I even felt that I was like, I don't think it's over because he wasn't satisfied, and that's what it was. He was not satisfied with his own performance. Um, the match that he had with Goldberg over in Saudi Arabia, that was
oh
more
yeah,
Goldberg than him, who stunk that up because
right. But
Goldberg.
still,
But
that still stunk. I mean, even that tag team match in Saudi Arabia with DX versus the Brothers of
oh,
Destruction
that
was terrible.
but that's when that sweet Saudi money's coming in. They're like they're saying we want to see these people in the ring.
But I got
We
to
don't.
ask you, for the Undertaker losing that streak almost nearly 10 years ago, there was opportunity for even WWE or even Mark to say, all right, I think it's done. I mean, you did lose the Brock. You did have that streak. The only thing that you were really sticking around for, at the time, you were coming back just once a year, maybe twice a year at best, just for
Yeah,
that streak. And so you could have ended it right there and still left on I felt that those negative matches against those a couple of times left a bit of a scar still on me as a fan because I didn't see Undertaker in his prime. And I'd rather just go back and look, when he was at his, greatest. And the same thing with Goldberg. I mean, Brock Lesnar is still kicking in the ring. Sting is, he has a lot of help in that ring with Darby Allin, with his opponents. But, I mean, I know it's time for Sting to hang it up too. And he knows it too, but it's like,
I
at
don't want
what
to.
point?
I don't want to see them all look like Ric Flair or Terry Funk. Now Terry Funk, I think, is finally done because he's had so many health issues lately. But Flair, I mean, Flair his last match,
Mm-hmm.
against Double J and um, with him and Andrade against Double J and
Jerry, Double J, Jay Lethal.
Jay Lethal. That's who it was.
Yeah,
Flair passed out during the match twice.
yeah.
He blacked out. And it's like, dude, you
You
need to,
trained. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, just stop.
I want to remember you for the positives and then for the good matches. And and I get it. When we talk about veterans today, they've wrestled in the '90s, 2000s. But you can tell when you don't have. Okay, here's a great example. Jeff Hardy is not the same in the ring, and I know he's one of those sticky situations who gets in trouble outside the company, inside the company. He also can't perform the same way that he can perform, 15 years ago. When is it time to be like, all right, if he comes back and says, "Hey, I'm ready to get back in the ring," does AEW give him that chance? Well, and why? If you do,
Jeff Hardy is not somebody you can stick in the mid card because just his style is so like
Well, not
electric.
anymore,
Not
right?
anymore. I mean, but I mean, his style is very kind of exciting to watch, but at the same
but his style
time,
has gone down though. He can't do
because he can't
his moonsault
exactly.
no more.
He can't do the moonsault. He can't do um
I mean, he
the
could barely
twist of
do the
fate,
twist of fate. I
and
mean,
that's that. I mean, now, the twist of fate. I mean, it's basically it's an RKO or a stunner. It's just
yeah.
you kind of swing into it. That's it. I mean, it's the same move. And the stunner, actually, I mean, Stone Cold. I mean, tell you all them years of dropping on his rear end. He's got back issues, and plus, after the accident that he had with Owen, when Owen, you know, did the pile driver to him, and you saw his head go. But Steve Austin knew when it was time to leave. Now he came back for that one match because he wanted to kind of go out in his terms.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah, the Undertaker came back. His match against AJ Styles, it was not meant to be his last match, but he felt his performance, and of course AJ Styles is going to give you a good match no matter what.
No, and a cinematic match, something that he was wanting the last couple of years, and it
Right.
worked so well, and
I'm
he
I'm
thought it
not a
was going to
fan
be
of
terrible.
those. I'm not a fan of those,
No,
but that one, I mean, I was like, all right. I mean,
for what
but
Taker had to offer and how they could shoot it,
his
I was
his
happy
character
with it.
his character was actually perfect for that. So Taker knew it's time for him to go, and I think for wrestlers also, when you're being used more and more to just put over other wrestlers, just like Big Show. Big Show, he was always kind of one of those. Well, you got to go through the Big Show portal. You have to wrestle him and beat him in order to move up next. Of course, Big Show, that wouldn't have happened 30, 40 years ago. Somebody his size, you're not going to beat them. But the problem is, before him was Andre was the only one that size. Big Show, you had people his size and bigger.
Right.
So I mean, I know it's a little bit different world, but Big Show was being used, okay, face heel, face heel, face heel, face heel. And he eventually left the company. He felt like, okay, I'm in a holding pattern, not doing a whole lot. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. And then now, of course, now he's also with AEW. Mark Henry, same thing.
But he's not in the ring though.
But he's not in the ring. I mean, and maybe that's what they felt, because you've seen a lot of the interviews with these wrestlers where they say, okay, I don't want to wrestle anymore because my body just can't take much more of it. However, I still think that I can contribute to the business in another way. Let me be an agent. Let me be part of creative. Let me be
right. And I'm completely fine with that.
Right.
But I mean, so okay, so in this case, I mean, obviously we know Sting is practically done. I think he says he has one more match this year, that his final match will be this year sometime. Dustin's about to be the same way.
Right.
If you were to ask, if I would ask you about Big Show, you say he probably should hang it up here very shortly also.
If he's not wrestling,
Jeff Hardy?
Jeff Hardy, I think, should hang it up. Jeff Hardy's younger than I am. I think
yeah.
Jeff Hardy should hang it up because his body can't take much more.
Jeff Jarrett.
I think Jeff Jarrett, he actually said that the match with Flair was his last match, was also his last match. Jeff Jarrett knows, because Jeff Jarrett has been involved with the wrestling business basically since he was born. Because
he's also been more behind the scenes. He's been more
because he understands, because his dad was Jerry Jarrett, the promoter. His grandmother was also a promoter, so he already knows that side of it. He actually helped create TNA Impact.
Right.
That was a lot of his doing. And so Jeff Jarrett, he understands like all aspects of the business. So if Jeff Jarrett wants to step away from in-ring competition, in-ring performance, go for it, because
you go down the list. If you're done with the big things like AEW, WWE, can you still go wrestle for an indie promotion though? Or you just be like, hey, cut off. Wildcat Chris Harris does it.
Wildcat, you see him right back there? He's right there.
Yeah.
He's right there watching.
Do you give him the green light? I mean, is he, I think he's in a comfortable position.
Every once in a while you'll see Wildcat getting a ring. He was part of the when they had their Rumble, down in Covington a few months ago. He was a surprise entrant.
And I like it because he's not in the ring every week.
But he's not in the ring every week.
Gives him time.
Because I mean, he turns 50 this year. He's only a couple months younger than I am. I turned 50 in August. He turns 15. Dude, he's at your Christmas baby. You can look it up on Wikipedia.
Right.
Christmas Day, Chris Harris turns 50 years old. So I mean, he knows
Okay.
he's not going to be.
So let
He
me ask you
shouldn't be
this,
in the world title picture.
because I know you talked about this before. Chris Harris has the green light to wrestle in NWF, which has been around for decades. Okay.
A few decades,
And
yeah.
you know, and he's in and out because he knows that, hey, first of all, it's about the younger guys, but two, he knows his body, right? He
Mm-hmm.
knows he probably can't do it week in and week out.
He
But you take
knows.
a
Yeah, he knows his
you give him the
capabilities.
green light, but then compare him to someone like Edge, who knows he can't do it every week, so he does it once in a while. But yet people are saying that he should hang up his boots.
I was okay. I was happy for Edge when he came back at the Rumble because he was
Mm-hmm.
able to beat the odds, the doctor. And I thought that when he came back the next year, won the Rumble, and then had the title match at WrestleMania and lost, that should have been it.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
because the Undertaker being the exception because he actually won his last match. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but your last match should be a loss. You should be putting over the next person to help elevate them. And Edge right now, they had the whole thing with the
Judgment
I
Day.
huh
With
Judgment
the
Day. Yeah.
Judgment Day. Yeah.
Yeah. The I Quit match. Um
Should have been
and
his last,
should have,
probably.
that one you can't really end on. They brought his wife in and started smacking her around to make him quit.
That's true.
So that's not really something to end on, but have a match where
But you had a Hell in a Cell match with Finn Balor at Mania, did you not? And I mean, right? Was that WrestleMania?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
And
look.
that was kind of the end of that feud. But and still, I wish that Finn Balor should have won instead of lost. You know,
Right. And
but
because
I mean,
you should go out on your back. I mean, that's
yeah.
what. And
But but the fact that Edge is still available, maybe one, two, maybe three more matches, probably within the next year, hopefully. Why don't we see him get the green light? Because he could still go around in there. I mean, he did
but
prove it at WrestleMania,
he
and we haven't seen
did,
him since.
but when he came back, when he finally came back at the Rumble, a couple months later, he got hurt again. It was his shoulder, but he was still getting hurt, and it's like, I mean, he's not young. I mean, he was out of the ring for 11 years before he came
That's
back,
true.
and that is, he's. I mean, I can speak, because I'm around Adam Copeland's age. Um, there's some things that I could do 10 years ago when I was still in uniform that I can't do now. Now part of
Okay.
that is just because I don't work out. I
But then
can't
you
say
could say the same thing to Brian Danielson, who came back with a similar injury, and
and
he's trying to go all out, and I think
and
he's
he got
injured
hurt
now.
again. And
Yeah.
they keep getting hurt, which I mean, it's the nature of the business. I mean, that's not a slap on them. It
Right.
is just is a nature. They're in a business where people get hurt. Um, but you have to know, okay, if you keep coming back, why do you keep coming back?
And what
Because
type of impact are you leaving on the fans? Because, like I
right,
mentioned, I mean, I love The Undertaker, but his terrible matches kind of left a little bit of a scar on me. And we're trying to remember him in his positive days. Same thing to, Ric Flair, for example. Hulk Hogan was also in that aspect.
not knowing when to hang it up.
Not
And
knowing when
not
to hang it
knowing,
up.
and so I mean, and so really, we posed the original question of when should a wrestler and a company part ways, but now it's also coming down to when should a
When should a
wrestler
company?
part ways with the business,
Yeah.
um, and or at least from the in ring aspect of it.
I mean,
Uh,
you reach the skyscraper of the WWE because there is a ceiling in the
mhm.
WWE. What do you do afterwards? Because now you're just floating around. Is Roman Reigns at that ceiling after he drops that? Whenever he drops that Universal Championship, once he drops it, what's next for him? Because he, in my opinion, has accomplished everything he could practically do. He's dominated WrestleMania. He's main evented. He's the face of the business for the last couple of years. I mean, there's not much more he can do. And I know he's getting, he has other personal health issues, but Seth Rollins is there. He's running out of opponents that he can really create a comfortable feud with. So maybe when you look at someone like a Sheamus or you look at Drew McIntyre in this sense, when it comes down to at least WWE, Drew McIntyre, what more can he do? Yeah, he's in the feud with Gunther, but afterwards, he doesn't have nobody that could really go toe to toe with him and give him an authentic challenge. You know, he's already had a feud with Roman. He's already faced Seth Rollins a couple years back. I want to say, what, 2018, where they wrestled for every single week for like 2.5 months straight, to be honest, when they were teaming up. Remember that?
Yeah.
And there's really just, you know, I mean, I know this is probably another conversation topic for next time, but you hit the, you know, ceiling top. Maybe it's also time for when you know you hit the ceiling, there's nothing else you could possibly do. Maybe that's time when it is to walk away, right?
When there's nothing left, whether it be for whatever company you're with, or there's nothing left, because Roman Reigns, he's at a point now where, you know, he's going to have to lose the title eventually, you know,
Right.
and, you know, he'll have to give it up now, whether that's in the ring or whether that's I'm retiring as champion. You guys take care, have fun. Here's the belt, have at it. Or
And I hate to say this, but Kenny Omega has hit the ceiling in AEW. Dean
oh, I believe
Ambrose
so.
has Dean Ambrose has hit the ceiling with what you're capable of doing in at AEW. He's won
Or
the
John
title,
Moxley.
or John Moxley. Sorry,
Yeah.
but there's a few athletes in AEW that has hit the ceiling, and that's why it's kind of like, all right, well, what's really realistically what's next for you is not as exciting of when you first joined the industry or for the company.
And, you know, some of them can have like a second run, like Ron Kellings. Ron Kellings is a former NWA world champion. A lot of people don't know that because all they see is R-Truth, but he's also having fun as R-Truth. He's
Yeah.
another one. He's my age.
And
He
he can
does
still
not have it.
go.
He does not have any business looking that good being 50 years old, because you look
Yeah.
at, I mean, he's shredded, you know, and he can still
Rey
go.
Mysterio on that other hand, right?
Rey
I mean,
Mysterio, another one.
I know
And
he knows he's going to hang it up in a couple of years, but he's limited, but he's giving back too, which is a key
I
important.
I honestly I thought Ray should have put Dominic over at WrestleMania and hung it up, because
I
when
still
you go in
think
the
he
Hall
has
of Fame,
time.
when you go in the Hall
Yeah.
of Fame, you're done. You
I
should
feel
be
like
done.
that's
You
your
should be like,
time.
all right, that's it. I'm done.
Right.
And they put him in the Hall of Fame and he's still wrestling. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You know,
But he's also dug himself with LWO, which has rejuvenated. It worked so well, and I don't think a lot of
right.
people expected it to be as good as it was going to be. And now you have a potential feud with Ray and Santos down the road, right? But I mean, you know, Ray's also not overworking himself. He's not the face of SmackDown. He's not trying to stick himself in. He's trying to help people get over, and that's why it works so well with Ray. But I mean, you know, I think there's so much more. We're maybe have to wait for part 2 on this, and maybe get Dwayne can come back in here and shed some light, because you still have the Mandy Rose situation. You still have the Mickey James situation. You know,
Zelina Vega is another one that, you know, now she's back and she's actually more popular than ever right now, I think, but she had some issues with them for a little bit. Sasha and Naomi, I mean, they walked away. I mean, they dropped the belts on Vince's desk and walked out, because they didn't. So they knew that was it for them. They were like, "You're not using us correctly. We're gone." So
and that's a bold move. I mean, you talk about, you know, work earlier, you know, and there's things that you just don't talk about now. You know, the good news is that, yeah, you're going to go share your experience, but I don't really think that Sasha or Naomi has really bashed WWE that hard as compared to some other athletes that have in the past.
Well, especially with Naomi, I mean, her husband is not only in the WWE still, but he's one
she
of.
Still could have.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's still one of the main. He's in one of the biggest, probably the biggest storyline right now in the company, and she starts bashing it. They punish him, and they would. Vince McMahon is that petty that he would. All of a sudden, he'd be like, "Hey, you know, Jay or oh my lord, Jimmy, yeah, because I believe she's married to Jimmy.
Even Solo could be punished. I mean,
yeah, they could all be.
Roman could be punished. I mean, I know that unlikely he's going to do it, but he could still punish him. I mean, just as much. Here's the thing: just as big as Vince has brought someone up in the industry, he could tear them down with the snap of the finger. Still. I'm sorry to say that.
Well, I mean, I think also though, and this is a story for another day. I think if he were to try to honestly take like a personal beef out against anybody in the Anawati family, they would all be leaving WWE and they would
Mhm.
show up somewhere else. It's like, oh, you don't want,
Or
okay,
I think that they outnumber Vince. I think Vince at this point of his time where he's at, in, in the Endeavor situation, if something like that's to happen, I think Vince is the one to get backlashed instead of the Iwani
probably.
family, in my
But
opinion.
but yeah, we'd definitely have to have a
A part
continuation on
two,
this.
I think
Yeah,
so,
part two. Whenever
because there's a lot more to talk about. And
whenever Dwalen's back from sunny Florida, like I said,
yeah,
we wish him. In fact, I'm gonna text him right now and say, dude, we are seriously talking about you right now. So,
put that
um,
up on Twitter. You'll be fine.
yeah. Let's see, dude, we are. Um, Actually, I just say we're giving you props right now on the show, which is the truth.
I like it. I wish I was down there. I mean, for how close we are, still haven't gone down there yet.
I mean, it's still, it took them 2 days to drive down there. If you're going with kids, it's going to take you 2 days to get there.
I mean, it's a lot better drive than going to California, to be
Oh, very
honest,
true.
with two kids. I mean, that still took us, I think that took us a total of 3 days, 3 full days of driving.
Oh, I can see that. Oh, I've never driven to California. I have driven to Nevada from to Vegas from around here. So, all right, so we'll definitely have to have a continuation on this once Dwaylen returns, and we'll have you back on as well, obviously. But yeah, good conversation.
I'm going to
And
say this for listeners here. Make sure if you guys have a story or you guys have an example or something that you want us to talk about, or Steve and Dwaylen to talk about in the topic, or along the line what you listened to today, be sure to either comment on the YouTube channel, leave the review on, because I believe you can leave reviews on audio platforms, right?
yes, you can. In fact, if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we will actually read it on the air. If any of the other platforms, such as like Spotify or Good Pods, where I know those two, you can do this, where you can actually leave a rating, but there's no way to leave a review. You can actually email the review at armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. And you send me a screenshot of the rating, and along with your review, I will also read that on the air.
You know what? Like I said, find them on Facebook. Find
Yep.
Steve or Dwaylen or Armchair Booking. DM them down there on Facebook. Let them know, maybe an example, a story, and they will share it on the podcast itself and have a discussion. I mean, I'm sure you guys are open to that.
Oh, we've done it because we actually do have people who actually email us, and
Yeah,
now sometimes it's just the timing of it, because it would like a question would work that week, but we're unable to
right.
get it in just because there are a couple times where we had some good questions we were going to ask, and then we were not able to record because life happens, and
I'm
unfortunately,
always
so
shooting you guys questions and
right.
topics and stuff like that. So yeah, I just want to make sure that gets out to everyone who's listening to or watching this. That listen, you guys are fan interactive. If fans want to get and weigh in their thoughts and opinions, do so, and you guys will definitely share them.
Yes, sir. But until we can meet again, my friend, I just got to say a good day,
Thank
goodbye,
you.
God bless.
Take care.